Your Truth with life strategist Laura T. Real advice for regular people. Now, here's Laura.
Hello and welcome to Own Your Truth, where we're talking real advice
What do
for
I
regular
cherish?
people. I'm Laura T. Thank you for listening. I know there's lots of ways you can spend your time, and I am grateful you're going to spend the next hour with me. So, in honor of daylight saving time, we're talking about time management. I chose this week to talk about time management because as we spring forward and lose an hour, it seemed the perfect chance to talk about our ongoing struggle with time. Ironically, we have more ways to manage time now than we ever have. And we use our phones, we have special apps, we write in calendars, and we even set alarms, all in an effort to control time. But in most cases, we still let time control us. Then, to make things even more complicated, we reinforce this sense of time being out of our control by saying things like, there's never enough time to fit everything in, or, where did the time go, or time is passing me by. The truth is, we all get the same amount of time each day. So tonight, we're going to take a different spin on time management, and we're going to talk about energy management. We're going to examine how you spend your time. And finally, we're going to take a close look at time management's best friend. You know, that dirty two-letter word most people avoid saying, which is no. N-O, no. Today, I'm going to share some personal stories so you can see how owning my time has totally changed my life. For people who know me, I really live what I coach. And there's no better way to show how this can incorporate into your world than to share sort of my experiences with time management. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. The best part of the entire show is when you call in. And so this is an opportunity for you to hear some tips and then ask questions about how this may or may not work for you. I'm here to give you real-time advice. I put that real time in there, pun intended. I've already received a few questions on the Own Your Truth with Laura T. Facebook page, but I love it most when I hear from you. So remember, you can call in and the second half of the show, which is around 8:30 p.m. The number is 203-333-WICC. And if you're anything like me, you need that spelled out. So 203-333-9422. Last week, I'd like to sort of recap. Last week, we talked about finding your ideal career. If you missed it, the recording is available on the Own Your Truth with Laura T. Facebook page. And when you click on that link, you'll find previous week's shows there as well. So you have access to everything we've talked about so far. And remember to follow the Own Your Truth with Laura T. Facebook page to get notices about upcoming show content, special behind the scenes, including weekly notes about what it's like to prepare for the radio show. There'll be definitely some interesting ones talking about tonight. It's fun, exciting, and, the show and the page offer some unexpected stuff. So make sure you check it out. Well, before we get into today's show, we will do what we do every week. We will start well. And what does that mean? It means you get more of what you focus on. So today and every Sunday, we start well with good news from around the neighborhood, across the state, and beyond. In this week's Own Your Truth Good News, we start off on sort of the national level, although it's still Northeast. It was inspiring to hear that a really good person did the right thing. This story comes from New Jersey, where a store clerk, Phil Campolo, found a pair of $2 lottery tickets left behind by a local resident. According to Mike Werski, he put the tickets down after he paid for them because he got distracted by his phone and then he walked out of the store, right? We can all relate to that. The next day, when he realized he lost the tickets, he went back to the store to see if they were there and learned that Mr. Campolo held them for him. Well, crazy enough, a couple days later, the winning numbers were drawn, and Werski discovered he won $273 million. How amazing. If Mr. Campolo didn't save those tickets for him, he would never have won. So Werski does plan to share his good fortune with Campolo privately. Congratulations to both men, and it's really great when doing the right thing pays off. Our next story is bringing the good news locally. If you're seeing head shaved while it's cold outside, it's because it's St. Baldrick's time of year. This important organization raises money to fund childhood cancer research and is the largest private non-governmental funder of childhood cancer research grants. Keep an eye out on Facebook and in the community. I've seen a lot out there. There's lots of hair being cut and hair being shaved off. So look for local campaigns being promoted, support this important cause, and remember, every gift counts. Another really great local story I discovered on our Good News on Facebook, and it comes from Monroe. This week, Massac High School students competed in the Worcester Polytechnic Institute VEX competition. The competition asked students to build innovative robots to solve an engineering challenge. The program involves 20,000 teams from 50 countries in over 1,700 competitions worldwide. Massac High School took 2 of the 3 available spots for the World Robotics Championship in Kentucky. So way to go, Monroe. Keep up the good work, and we look forward to hearing how you do in the world's competition. All right. So the next 2 Own Your Truth good news stories, there was so much good news this week, are very personal to me. The first one is Mitchell Triance and his amazing curling team, led by Skip Laura Katz from Nutmeg Curling Club, won their division in the Eugene Fink Memorial Junior League Bonspiel tournament held in Schenectady, New York. It was an awesome win for the team and gives me the perfect opportunity to talk about the wonderful curling club we have right here in Bridgeport. You know, it happens a lot, so I've heard, being in the curling community. My son saw curling during the Olympics and wanted to give it a try. So I told him, if you can find a place, we'll go check it out. So fortunately, Nutmeg Curling Club is right around the corner. And, you know, you realize how fortunate we are when you come to discover other people travel an hour, sometimes even more, to find a place to curl. It's a terrific team with a kind and committed group of coaches. So if you or anyone in your family has ever wanted to try curling, it's a lot of fun. The next open house is March 30th from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. No reservations required. The curling club is located next to Wonderland of Ice in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Come on down and check them out. It is a ton of fun and really great to watch. Okay, in our final Own Your Truth good news story, it's important to recognize another winner in our household. Taylor Triance was announced as the first place Connecticut state winner in photography for the PTA Reflections Contest, which focused on heroes around us. Her winning photograph can be seen on display in the high school and will go on to represent the state at the national level. So congratulations, and way to go to all these students. It's stories like these and the one I shared last week about the students in Westport composting that really showcase the heart and talent and commitment of today's youth. I know there are more stories out there like this, so please share. That's this Sunday's Good News on Own Your Truth with Laura T. Each week I'm reminded there's so many good deeds that go unnoticed and cool things happening around the community. If you have news about local, individual organizations or business making a difference, please let me know. Visit the Own Your Truth Facebook page and listen each Sunday to hear your news announced on the show. Okay, so we're going to dive into a different spin on time management. Tonight on the Own Your Truth with Laura T talk show, we are going to honor daylight savings time by talking about time management. You know, I thought I would take and dive into some interesting facts about daylight saving time, because we do this thing twice a year. We move our clocks forward, we set them back, and really, what is it all about? Well, daylight savings time was originally enacted in 1918, but proved to be so unpopular that it was repealed because the idea of changing the clocks was just not something people were willing to do, despite the fact that it was observed in European countries and in Canada. The whole goal was to conserve energy. Now, there have been many variations of daylight savings introduced, but it wasn't until 1966 that the Uniform Time Act was signed into law by President Johnson. Again, with the idea that more daylight during traditional hours would conserve energy. given today's use of electronics, air conditioning, and all of the different electrical appliances, it doesn't conserve energy, but it does have a lot of positive effects, including people being more physically active. And so I start off with this idea of how can we appreciate this idea of time. And I will share another quote, it's like a poem I found about time. Time is free, but it is priceless. You can own it, but you can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. Once you've lost it, you can never get it back. So today we lost an hour by the clock. But really the question is, how many hours do you lose in a week? How are you managing your time? And when you look back at your life, will you be proud of how you spent your time? So in a minute, we're going to dive into time management and take a different look at how you're spending time. We are back, and you are listening to Own Your Truth with Laura T. Tonight, we're talking about time management. And before we begin, I am going to share a little story, because the irony of tonight's show is that in looking at how I mentioned I was going to share some personal stories tonight, in looking at how I managed my time this week, I was in such a rush to get here. And of course, when you're rushed, everything went wrong. Actually, my computer went down, and then I couldn't get anything to print, and then I was worried that I wasn't going to have things to say, and, the family comes in, and they're there to help you, and it was really in that moment that I was, what is happening? What is happening? And it was hard to remember that everything is going to happen exactly as it's meant to. And so as I was driving here and thinking about not having any material, which I do have material, but it wasn't at the level that I really wanted, I had to really think, how did I manage my time this week? And you know what? You're going to hear a common theme throughout what I talk about. It's really about creating your life experience. And, this week, in terms of preparing for the show, I didn't create the time for the show because there were other things happening in my life. It happens to all of us, right? We have things that come up with our kids, and we have work obligations, and you get to that moment and you say, well, am I prepared enough? Do I have, in this case, enough material? And so when I was driving and thinking about how did I spend my time, I was really stressed. And then I calmed down because I really did have the life experience this week that I wanted, which may mean that the show isn't exactly perfect, and my notes aren't exactly perfect, and I'm not quite sure if we'll have enough material to fill the time today, but we'll find a way, because my week was great. I had a full week of client work and some other prep work that I had to do for my coaching role with my traditional clients. And then this weekend, we decided to go to Schenectady, New York as a family and watch my son in this Bonspiel that he won. And you know what? Those are the moments that you don't get back. And so, again, the show may not be perfect, and there may be glitches. And you know what? We'll work through all of them. But the life experience overall is exactly what I want. And so if I can give you one message throughout tonight, and even going forward, is work with what you have and create the life experience you want. And so with that, I'll get into Own Your Truth coaching tip number 1, which is time inventory. So when I'm working with clients and we're looking at where do they spend their time, and no, everything I'm talking about here, I've done myself. We look at creating a time inventory, and essentially it's a sheet. I'll put one up on the Own Your Truth Facebook page that allows you to look at how you've scheduled your time in 30-minute increments throughout the day. The great thing about this piece of paper is that you then compare how you scheduled your time with what you actually do. And the key is really looking at the patterns, right? We kind of get caught up in the to-dos, and I'm going to talk about to-do lists in a minute, but we get caught up in the what we're doing, that we're not looking at our really big patterns. So one of the things that I'll ask you to do is, look at creating this time inventory for 5 to 10 days. What are the patterns that you see? How much time do you spend creating versus putting out fires? How much time do you spend on you versus doing for other people? How much time do you spend in meetings versus doing what you feel in your heart you were hired to do? Right? So again, it's looking at how are we spending our time and what are the patterns that we're seeing. It's really difficult to make changes when we don't have a really clear idea of where we are. And until we're writing down how we're spending our time, we're kind of guessing and it all gets jumbled together in our mind. So writing it down in 30-minute increments is going to help you really look at how are you spending your time? Is it the way that you intended? And what are the patterns that you see in the ways that you spend your time? Especially if you're not feeling fulfilled or you're not feeling like you get as much done as you want. Okay, so own your truths. Coaching tip number 1 is do the time inventory. It will be eye-opening, and I promise it will help you as you gauge where you want to spend your time going forward. All right, own your truths. Coaching tip number 2 is think energy management instead of time management. So what changes when you think where you spend your time and how much energy that takes you? So we have a limited amount of time and energy each day, and yet most of us spend the majority of both doing things we don't enjoy. Now listen, we all have to do some things we don't enjoy. Like, for instance, I don't enjoy doing my taxes, but I know it only happens once a year, so I've created a system to get through it. But what I'm talking about is where you spend the majority of your time. If you're spending the majority of your time doing things that aren't natural for you, that you don't enjoy, that takes so much energy, which, if it's a choice that you're making, then you know to replenish that energy. But most often we just get in the habit of doing and we're not making the choice. So if you're doing things at home or even at work that you don't enjoy and it's sucking up your energy, then let's really start to take a look at what you're doing. So in this instance, I'm going to suggest you evaluate where you spend your money. Make a list of all the things you do during the day. Consider making one for work and a separate one for home, right? List all of the things that you do, all of the big things, all of the little things that you do, especially the little things, because those are the things that we overlook and they stack up. And then you want to look at how much time does it take for you to do those things. Once you have an idea of how much time it takes, then rate your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, it's energetically draining, it's horrible, and you don't enjoy it. 10 being, you know what, this is great. It may even be energy creating activity because you're in alignment and you're feeling in flow. So anything that you rate 1 through 3 must be taken off the list. If it's miserable and exhausting, it's got to be removed. So let's say that cooking dinner is energetically exhausting, and yet you have a family. And so you say, but wait a second, I have to cook dinner. Is that really true? Do you have to be the one to cook dinner, right? So when I say remove it from the list, it's also a push to get really resourceful. I'm constantly looking at how can I leverage the things that I don't enjoy? How can I get help? Another thing is for very busy type A, take it all on, take charge type of people, it can be hard to ask for help. But if we don't ask for help, we're the ones left doing it all. And so it's really important that you make that list. Again, you're evaluating your energy and you're looking for places where you can leverage other people, other things. For instance, if we stay on the dinner, there are companies now you can pay and they can send you meals. There's places you can go and create meals. Again, how can you get creative so there's something that you do that sucks energy that can actually be either done completely by someone else or at least partially be leveraged so it doesn't take up so much energy. right? So those are your 1 through 3s. And then anything 4 to 7, again, those are areas where they may not be a total energy suck, but you're not enjoying them, and you want to evaluate those as well. Again, looking for places where you can ask for help or where you can even get really creative. You know, one of my goals is that at some point I have a chef who comes in and cooks dinner for us. Now, don't know when that will happen, but it's out there. I put it out there to the universe to see. So really get creative. It doesn't mean it has to happen now, but it gives your brain a place to look for opportunities to get help and get assistance. And then anything that's an 8, 9, or 10, meaning that it fills you up, it gives you energy, those are the things that you want to focus on. Those are the areas where you want to be spending time. Those are the areas that help you stay in flow. So again, looking at how to evaluate your energy and where you're spending it, that small task is going to free up so much time in the future that you are going to find you can do so much more, and yet it takes a whole lot less time. All right. Another key to this idea of energy management over time management is to forget the notion of work-life balance. So I get a lot of people who will ask me, actually I get a lot of requests to speak on this topic of work-life balance. And I say we spend so much energy beating ourselves up over this inability to balance everything. So I say, forget balance. Throw it all out the window. Like, be kind to yourself. I mean, I don't know anyone whose life is 50-50 or 25-25-25-25 or whatever other combination that you could think of. Do you? See, probably not. But we hold on to this notion of balance as if all things are equal. And when we do that, it's easy to feel overworked, unfulfilled, and frustrated. So instead, consider a life that works around counterbalance. In the book, The One Thing, Gary Keller uses a really great analogy of a ballerina. When you see a ballerina pose on point, she appears to be weightless, like she's floating on air, and she exemplifies the very idea of balance and grace. And yet, when you take a closer look, you'd see her shoes are vibrating rapidly, right? Making those minute-by-minute adjustments for balance. And this idea of counterbalancing, when it's done really well, gives this illusion of balance. So I offer this 2-millimeter shift in thinking because it gives you a different perspective. There are times when work is going to require more of your time and attention. And then there are times when family is going to require more of your time and attention. Really give yourself the space for this counterbalance so that you can be present wherever you are, knowing that a shift will occur before you ultimately fall over, right? And that's the idea, is recognizing when that shift needs to occur. It's also making sure that you're actively choosing the shift instead of allowing it to happen to you. Let me explain through an example. Oftentimes we feel like we don't have control when things are crazy and at work and they're out of control and hectic. But what we do have control over is this idea of deciding when we need the energy to shift back. And again, it's choosing and asking for this time so that you literally don't fall over, right, energetically. So coaching tip number 3 is going to help. We're going to get to that in a minute. Is going to help most people with this idea of counterbalance. So remember, coaching tip number 3 is to say no, and that'll help. But we'll get to that in a minute. All right. The next thing I talk about in this idea of energy management versus time management is the language I hear so often. I am busy. So I am busy has become this identity that people own. Like, I'm busy. I'm so busy. Listen, everybody's really busy. And yet what we don't recognize is using that language actually sucks us energetically. Because remember, the brain has 2 jobs: to answer your questions and prove you're right. So when you take and use the 2 most powerful words in the English language, which are I am, and then you follow it by something that doesn't serve you, like I'm so busy, it actually triggers the brain into seeing you as whatever you've just described. Essentially, I am busy becomes your identity. And here's the key, and this is like blows my mind when I think about it, is we'll sacrifice our values to stay true to our identity. So even when things are important, if you've owned I am busy as your identity, it overrides whatever else you've said you've committed to. So I'll share a personal example. When I was in real estate, I was really, really busy. And, to be honest, I was mostly busy responding to other people's demands because I never set my own standards. I would tell people, I'm busy, like it was like this badge of honor. And it made me proud when people would say, I know you're so busy. The truth was, I was busy because I wasn't working smart. I was in the grind. I was hustling for anything. Like, I was doing business wherever I could. I was doing whatever I thought I should. And I have my little air quotes up, right? I wasn't focused on what I wanted. And it became so much part of my identity. I didn't even realize it until I left the real estate industry. Today, I choose totally different language. And I consciously do not attach my identity to it. So, for example, listen, we all have busy days, we have busy weeks. The language I use is, my work is wonderfully hectic. Or some days I'll say, my days are perfectly full, right? I want to trigger my brain to think differently about how I'm spending my time. And I don't want that idea of being busy to be my identity. It was such a conscious decision that I changed my schedule. I work from 9 to 3. My voicemail and email indicate I don't answer either from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And to be honest, until this radio show, I didn't work weekends, which was fantastic. So now I do a little bit of work on weekends. But my priority is my life example. And everything and everyone has to work around that. And those who don't work around it are simply not a match for me. It's neither good nor bad. We get to release each other from expectation and go on our merry way, right? And so when I share this with people, especially when I'm in big groups, there tends to be a couple who are a little bit resistant. So if you're feeling resistance to what I'm describing about being able to own your time and about setting your schedule, I get it, because I hear all of the time, like, I could never do that. I'd get fired, or, that just wouldn't work in my industry. My industry is different. Again, I hear that because what I'm saying is so contrary to what we're taught and to the nature of the very devices that are running our lives right now. But I will tell you with 100% certainty, it does work for everyone, regardless of your industry. And, I'll ask my accountant clients what it's like with this new way of thinking during tax season. It's amazing how their worlds have changed just with the shift in thinking. So I know it can work for everyone. Again, thinking about how you can change your thoughts about time to thoughts about energy and filling yourself up. So own your truth, coaching tip number 2, think energy management instead of time management. All right, on to the last and final Own Your Truth coaching tip, which is just say no. Just say no. First, say no to the to-do list. It's important to know that 41% of the to-do list doesn't get done, and it just gets moved on to the next day. The problem with to-do lists is they are urgent but unimportant tasks. So begin by saying no to that to-do list. With infinite options and everything that we have to do, it can get easy to feel like everything's a priority. If you have more than 3 priorities, know that you have no priorities. And so the key is setting your priority. What do you want to do today, this week, this month, on this project? What do you want to do on vacation, during the holidays? When you're clear on your priorities, it's easier to say no to other people's. Okay. So remember, coaching tip number 3 is just say no. Typically, I would give some examples here, but what I really want to do is make sure that I get to time with your questions. So I'll hold off on my stories. If we don't get questions, I'll share a couple of them. But really, this is your opportunity to talk about time management and how you could use some of these tips in your own world. Remember that You can call in a few minutes. We have a special surprise first, our Own Your Truth Musical Artist of the Week. But you can call in 203-333-WICC. Remember, that number is 203-333-9422. I'm going to do a quick review of the 3 coaching tips I gave today. Coaching tip number 1, time inventory. Understand how you spend your time. Coaching tip number 2, think energy management over time management. And coaching tip number 3, just say no. Okay, before we get to your questions, I want to share Own Your Truth Musical Artist of the Week. A huge thank you to my friend Phaedra for introducing me to the totally original music of Liz Gullhorn. Liz is a songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and band leader based in Southern Connecticut, who describes her current sound as Nancy Sinatra on a grunge bender. I totally love that. The song you're about to hear, Chipped Fingernails, appears on her split single with Julie Beeman and was released on Gullhorn's own label, Little Cowgirl Records, during February of this year. Take a listen to Chipped Fingernails.
About what to say, when I'm dreaming about what to say, when I'm thinking about what to
Let's give it up for Liz Gullhorn. If you are interested in hearing more of her terrific sound, her website will be available on the Own Your Truth with Laura T Facebook page. Know her next Connecticut gig will be a solo show Friday, April 5th at Best Video Film in Culture Center in Hamden. So excited to be featuring these great artists. Thanks so much, Liz. Listen, I'm thrilled at the recommendations coming in on the Own Your Truth Facebook page. Remember, if you or someone you know would like to hear your original music live on the show, I am featuring an artist each week. So send me a message on the Own Your Truth Facebook page and listen to hear your music live every Sunday from 8 to 9 p.m. Okay, now let's get to Own Your Truth's Q&A. This is my favorite part of the show. If you have questions about time management, energy management, how to spend your time, or about any of the tips I've given so far, please give a call in. Remember, the number is 203-333-WICC. Again, the number is 203-333-9422. It has been awesome getting so many questions from the Own Your Truth followers on Facebook. Thank you so much. I'll do my best to get to all of them. And remember, if I don't during the hour, I'll answer your questions online after the show. All right. So the first question I have is actually one that's asked a lot. It comes from Holly in Shelton. I'm a full-time working mom. When my day in the office is done, I spend my afternoons and evenings taking my kids where they need to go. I don't have time for me. Even getting to the gym is a hassle. I either get up before everyone else at like 4 a.m. or I do it at the end of the day, which is close to 8 p.m. Either way, I'm exhausted. What can I do? Wow. Like I said, this is a question I get asked a lot, Holly. First, there's two pieces here. Number one, it's looking at the commitment you have to exercising. So if this question is specifically about how do you make more time for exercise, we've got to first evaluate your commitment to exercise. And so what we do know is we don't do the things we should. We only do the things we have to. And so it's really important that if exercising is something that is a priority for you, that you make the time for it, right? Because it isn't something that is going to necessarily easily fit into the day. It's something that you have to be committed to so that it works around all of the other activities that you have going on with the kids. The other piece of this is looking at, I hear so often parents, we have these little beings we're in charge of. That doesn't mean that their schedules take charge of our lives. And so it's really important to put in perspective what the kids are doing. I know that there's lots of activities they could be doing, and you get to decide how best to manage your family time. I know for me, I am not good about driving kids to a million different activities. And so, as a result, they're only allowed to pick 2 activities each. Again, I give this as an example, not because it's going to be a perfect fit for you, but for you to start to think about, do the children's activities need to be limited, right? It doesn't need to be you sacrificing something that, in this case, exercise, if it's a priority, for you to fit it all in or for you to do it at crazy hours. It is really looking at what is the priority for your experience as a family, and then being able to counterbalance how much time is spent on kids' activities, how much time is spent on your activities. So again, there's a couple of pieces here. First and foremost, really evaluating the priority exercise has in your life. And then if it is a priority, what does it take to fit it in your schedule right now? And then that may take some maneuvering with kids' activities. That may take causing you to decrease some of those activities. But it really, you get one chance at this life as well. And you're teaching your children how to be a part of a community where there's multiple people. And so you'll all have to work with each other's schedules. And that means that you get to have part of that schedule as well. Holly, I hope that helps you look at finding a new way to balance getting in some exercise and even just some me time, right? Awesome. All right. The next question comes from Deb in New York. I'm good at time management. I know where I need to be and when I need to be there, and I get everything done. My challenge is staying present when I'm somewhere. I'm always thinking about the next thing or the next place I have to go. I feel like I'm missing out on special moments, especially with my kids. How can I continue to stay organized and be present at the same time? Wow, this is a really great question, because I think what happens is we look at being organized and being present as if they're connected, right? Like the question, how can I stay organized and be present at the same time? Well, first, we're going to separate those two. What does it take for you to feel comfortable and confident that you are organized in the moment? Once you have those keys for you, what does it take to be organized? And you're doing that, it then allows you to be more present in the moment. For example, a lot of people will look at managing their day and they have everything in their head. And so it can be really difficult to stay present when there's so much information moving around in our head. A key thing for you to try may be writing it all down so that it no longer needs to stay in your head. It could be setting alarms. We have all of this technology. How can we use it to help us? If you set an alarm for each thing that needs to happen, you then get to release the worry of where you're going to next, because you know you can expect the alarm to trigger a notification to tell you the next thing needs to happen. That idea of being present is so important. It could also be reducing the amount of things you have on your schedule, right? So that you can have a little bit more buffer time in between. Again, everyone tends to be scheduled so tightly. There isn't that buffer to enjoy the moment, to spend the extra couple of minutes at the end of a program to chat, whatever it is that you enjoy. So another quick tip I will give is creating a pattern interrupt for the moment you're in the activity, right? So I say we can't control the first thing that comes into our mind, but we control everyone thereafter. So, you're present, you're at an event, and then you're thinking about what to do next. Recognizing that and stopping yourself. Asking yourself, what do I want to experience in this moment? Will help get you present. Or think of a question to help get you present and bring you back to whatever you're doing. You don't want to miss out on these opportunities, especially with family. So again, Deb, I hope those tips help you. There's kind of a couple in there that you could try on. See what works for you and see what works best with your family. All right, we have a caller. Hello, this is Laura T.
Hi, Laura. This is Julie. I have a question for you. I'm listening to your show. I'm wondering what to do if you're a perfectionist. So to be present in the moment, yes, I can do that. But how do you combat that perfectionism, that need to handle everything and handle everything perfectly, and the anxiety that induces?
That is such a great question. This idea of being a perfectionist. So can you give me a specific example of when that's happened to you, where you're kind of caught up in that inner conflict between perfection and being present?
I have a lot of people in my life who have had that happen, specifically a child. So, for instance, that perfectionism will cause procrastination. So that time management, as a perfectionist goes to do a task, sometimes that task won't get accomplished, or the task will be put off, and procrastination will occur because they're trying to avoid it not becoming perfect.
Got it. Okay.
So if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So the idea of, let's kind of take these separately. One is putting things off. The other one is spending too much time. One of the things in working with people who are perfectionists, and, it's such an admirable quality. And I say every great characteristic is good until it's at its extreme. And so when we look at people who have a high standard and have a high quality, they then take that turn and go to perfectionists. And so when I'm looking at a perfectionist and how much time they're spending, I do suggest that they set an alarm, a timer, so that they limit the amount of time that they spend on something. And they're the ones who determine the amount of time. That's really important for them, is to kind of have control over it. And then they have to be the ones to decide, once that timer's up, I know that I've spent enough time, and then I can move on. But that's decided in advance. Because typically what happens is they get caught up in the activity. For instance, I worked with a client who was researching, and then that research led to another research, and that led to, and they wanted to just know as much as they could. Well, you get to a certain point, and it's that analysis paralysis. And so limiting the amount of time requires them to put, a block around it and say, what I have has to be fine right now. Does that help?
Yes, no, it makes perfect sense. It's just, it's the constant even revision. We give ourselves, the child gives themselves enough time. It's that next step of, okay, I've done this to completion. I've set my time, but oh look, I've finished before the deadline, and now I'm going to keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, so that just being, I guess there's that old adage of being okay with the, not having, I don't know, what is it, the perfect harm the good type of thing.
Another recommendation I would give you is to sit with the child and ask them how they define perfection. Right? Because, something interesting about perfection is, again, it's sort of one of those identities people claim like a badge of honor, and yet when they're functioning, they find it doesn't serve them. And so when we look at this idea of how do you define perfection? Because, again, that helps them set their own limits. So looking at, okay, this is how you defined perfection. Okay, so does this help you get to perfection? How much time does it take for you to get to perfection? And so again, you're helping them build the mental muscle and know that this takes time. It's great if you're working with a child now, because as we get older, when we build those habits, the longer we do the habit, the harder it is to break the habit, right? And so working with the child now to help them understand when that perfectionism is not serving them, so that they can take steps to, again, make progress. And people enjoy the progress.
Right. Well, thank you
Does that
so very
help?
much. This was very helpful. It really was. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Good night.
Good night. Hi, we're back, and you're listening to Own Your Truth with Laura T. Your questions about time management are awesome. I think I have time for one more. So let me take a look. Let's see. The next question comes from Carol in Seymour. It's so hard, she writes, it's so hard for me to say no. It's hard to say no to family, to friends, even to strangers when they ask me to do something. What do I do? Well, that's a huge question, because I know it's something that a lot of people face, is how do we say no? And, I look at, depending on it's so important to know that no isn't rejection. It's that decision to own your time, right? It's not a rejection of what they're asking or what they're doing. It's simply you deciding to own your time. Sometimes that 2mm shift in thinking helps people understand that when you say yes to something that's not important, that means you are subconsciously saying no to a lot of other things that may be more important. And so that idea of saying no, again, it's helpful when your priorities are clear. And whether that's what you've set a priority for the day, for the week, for the month, for a program that you're involved in, it's not your job to take on a lot of responsibility. And so that doesn't fit into your world, right? A lot of people take on extra things because they want to help, and then they run out of time, or they're sacrificing family time, and they're really unhappy. And so when we give so much that we deplete our own energy, it doesn't serve anyone. And so I mention these 2-millimeter shifts in thinking to help you build up that mental muscle in being able to say no to the things that simply aren't your priority. Again, it doesn't mean that they're not important in life and society. They're simply not your priority. That starts with setting your priority. Know what you want to see happen in your day, in your week, in your month, in your year. Thanks, Cal, for your question. Thank you for joining me. Next Sunday is St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to talk about luck and the law of attraction. We'll look at how the brain works in attracting what you want and how your language could be preventing you from living your dreams. So tune in next Sunday from 8 to 9 p.m. This is Laura T. on Own Your Truth. I'll hear you then. Good night.